Hey crew, I've got the key to this 1995 Ferrari F355 Berlinetta. We are going to take it for a drive, but first, let's check out how it looks on the inside and outside. This particular example has been tastefully modified by the owner, Brandon Corderer, and I will point out all the changes. Starting up here at the front, we have these Morimoto fog lights, but the rest of the front end is fully factory, including the pop-up headlights. This car right here is painted in the classic Rosso Corsa, means racing red. And at the side is a set of 18-inch Augment centerlock alloy wheels in a Ferrari F50 design. Those are wrapped in upgraded Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires, 255 section front and 295 at the back. That's some wider, stickier rubber than factory, and the brakes are an upgrade as well. We've got these Brembos on drilled rotors. Stepping back to look at the profile, you might say, gee, that car looks awfully low. And indeed it is. It's on a set of Nitron R1 racing coilovers, and the lack of wheel gap is very visually appealing. Then here at the back is a mostly stock look with the louvered engine cover above the black mesh grille. Love Brandon's plates, so good. And here we do have an upgraded Ito Racing exhaust system, and it juts out just ever so slightly beyond the rear bumper. This car is just jaw-dropping from every angle. And one thing that really stood out to me was that it doesn't have a very big footprint. It's not a really large vehicle. Think Porsche Cayman in its size. And I love that Brandon's dream car is the Ferrari F50, and he's tastefully incorporated elements of that car in this one to make it a baby F50 of sorts. Now my question for you is, which looks better, a fully factory F355 or what Brandon has done to his car? Let me know in the comments, and let's check out the interior. Opening up via the hidden door handle and looking inside, you can instantly spot the changes between this car and a factory 355. First, we've got these Recaro Pole Positon sport bucket seats, which are very F50 in their design, along with a Ferrari F50 steering wheel, smaller in diameter and fixed in position. Then there's carbon fiber for the door sills, door cards, and the center tunnel. There's also some Alcantara wrapping around the gauge cluster with red stitching. Just to the side of the drilled aluminum pedals is the release for the very spacious frunk. Then just outside the handbrake is the release for the engine cover. Now getting inside is a bit of a challenge, especially if you're taller. Thankfully, these seats do slide by pulling up on that bar, and I've done so to give me a greater access point. Get one leg in, sit on the side bolster, then scoot the rest of the way, and then get stabbed by the seat belts. That felt good. Now, closing up the door gently and taking stock of things. Boy, this wheel looks so good, so much better than the factory wheel, both in style and size. Just beyond it is the gauge cluster. I've got the speedo there, the tach to the right of that, the oil pressure above the oil temperature. Then here in the middle, we've got the large air vents. Beneath that, we've got clock, fuel gauge, and then oil temp once again. The 355 badge is there amidst some leather. What you're not seeing is the factory radio, which was a head unit right there, and it stood out a lot. Brandon has put a piece of leather instead, and I prefer that. Visibility is excellent. This is a 90s vehicle. It doesn't have very thick pillars. What's not as great is my headroom. So here at 6 feet tall, my head is grazing against the roofline, which means I could not fit a helmet on if I wanted to track this car, which I didn't get approval for, and I will not be doing today. Anyway, center tunnel. We've got some switches here. This is for an added hydraulic front end lift. Very glad Brandon put that here because this car is so low. This is for the lights. We've got defroster, door locks, and something related to the windows. Probably should have asked Brandon. Along with these two on the other side of the fuel door. Not sure what those are for exactly. I do know what this is for. This is the pièce de résistance, the gated manual gear selector, along with the aluminum ball. Oh, that feels so right in the hands. Then we've got our climate control system here, and I think this is for power adjustments for the door mirrors outside of the ashtray. And those door mirrors, by the way, are not all that large, but thankfully, as I showed you, you can see everything. And the rest of the center tunnel with the storage and carbon fiber is just beautiful. The whole cabin is absolutely gorgeous. I cannot wait. Let's take the 355 for a drive. All right, let's fire it up. Ooh, that feels right. Not just the V8 coming on, but the action of ignition. It's lost in the modern age. Although I did drive my 94 Land Cruiser here, and that's also a key in the ignition situation. But it doesn't have a V8, so it's all right. Hello, cabin crew. Thanks for joining for this drive review in a 95 Ferrari F355 Berlinetta. And let me begin by throwing on my seatbelt here, which has been jabbing me in the side this entire time. That's better. Okay. Now, let's select our drive mode. Drive mode, come on. This is a 95. Your drive mode is the manual gear selector, which I'm going to engage, clutching in. The pedals are so tightly stacked together. Glad I wore some narrow shoes. Going into first gear, delicately, and then releasing the mechanical handbrake. Park is off, and we are rolling. And let me just begin with a turning radius test in the 355. Got that wheel fully cranked. And this nice small wheelbase sports car turns around fairly succinctly. Let's follow that up with two other important demonstrations. The horn in the 355. If that isn't Italian, I just don't know what is. And what about the turn signal sound? We're not turning right now, but let's just listen. Classic signal sound, and I love the light just flickering at me. Here we go. So I'm going to give you 2 bits of story time while driving this 355, especially as we're just getting warmed up here. The first story time is going to be personal. So I have an affinity for 90s, well actually late 80s and 90s Ferraris for a couple reasons. For one, growing up, I lived across the street from a gentleman who collected cars, and his 2 centerpieces of his collection was an 87, I think it was 87, Ferrari 328 GT-S in this beautiful baby blue on navy blue leather. And the other piece was his 1989, I think, or maybe that was 87, I'm not sure, Ferrari Testarossa in red and tastefully upgraded, much like what Brandon has done to this car. And those cars and the way he loved them and drove them, he actually drove those cars as Brandon drives this car and encourages me to drive it in that same way. That really drew me to love cars. Not as things that you'd put in a museum or in some storeroom that you'd never drive but just admire, but as things you actually appreciated because you drove them intentionally and because you drove them somewhat aggressively sometimes, the way they were engineered to be driven. So that had me fall in love with cars. So encountering another essence of that has just pulled me back into a nostalgic state, and I love it. The other bit of story time is about the F355. So this car was built on the bones of the 348, its predecessor, but they wanted it to be very different because the then president of Ferrari, Luca di Montezemolo, had driven a 348, and I think at a stoplight drag raced a Mark I Golf, or Rabbit at the time, GTI, and lost, and was appropriately embarrassed and said, "This is not tolerable. For a Ferrari, it needs to be a real performance car." So they went to work on this one. First thing they did was bore out the 3.4 liter V8 to a 3.5. Then they added 5 valves per cylinder as opposed to the 4 valves per cylinder of the 348. And then they added a 6th gear, and that one was more for livability. You were going to be able to cruise on the highway at a lower RPM. And the combination gave them 375 horsepower and 268 pound-feet of torque. At the time, in 95, this was the highest horsepower per liter car. The result was a car that Ferrari and its president could really be proud of. And this one in particular makes a little more power than that 375. Makes about 400 horsepower according to the dyno, thanks to the Tubi headers that have been added, the Nitron Racing exhaust system, and a Gruppe M carbon fiber intake. And what that has done is really just give it a little more punch and just a bit more in the mid-range. It doesn't revolutionize the driving experience. But enough about the stories, let's talk about the here and now. Things I'm interacting with at this very moment, like this F50 derived steering wheel, which is just perfect. The diameter is nice and small, the thickness is just right, the way my hands slot in at 9 and 3 and grip into the back, it just engages me immediately, even at low speeds here. And now we are up to operating temperature for the oil, so I can start to get on it a little more. But before that, let me talk about what I imagine for many of you, as it was for me, is a mystique about a gated manual. Let me first just say that the reverence for the gated manual is not misplaced. I've driven a gated manual maybe twice before in my life, including in the predecessor to this car, the 348. And each time, it just gives me this sense of joy that I don't even have in standard manual cars, most of them at least. The way it feels to row through the cogs, to watch it happen, to feel that engagement, to hear the clicks, is a different level of immersion that you have, and I love every second of it. The next point is that this car is actually very easy to drive. It's of course easy to find the right gear. You're looking at it, you know when you're engaged in it. But the clutch release and engagement point are easy to delineate. You can feed in the power in a gentle way, move yourself off that clutch, get up to speed, and as you get towards 5,000 RPM and above, the car just starts to change. For one, the baffle in that Nitron Racing exhaust system does open. The soundtrack becomes absolutely magical, and you start to really feel the, in this car, 400 horsepower putting in work. Oh, that noise. And if you've seen my videos before, you know I really do appreciate this scenery when I get to drive this route. But for once, perhaps, I really just want to look inside this cabin and admire this steering wheel and that gear selector, the jewelry before my eyes, and then to appreciate the aural pleasure. A-U-R-A-L, guys, come on, get your head out the gutter. The aural pleasure of that NAV8. You know I don't really make ASMR videos anymore, but I may have to borrow this car once again and bring it back, because every noise, not just the motor, the gear selector, the turn signal, everything I'm interacting with that has a reciprocating noise is one of nostalgia and magnificence. And I just want a video dedicated to me not talking and just listening. So hopefully the point has been made clear. This is very easy to just drive around town, and the seats being as comfortable as they are, I wouldn't mind spending quite a bit of time in them, getting A to B or getting to a good canyon road. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to do that today, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to get on it a little bit and see what kind of experience awaits me. Oh, being able to stay in it all the way to 8,500 RPM for that cutoff is so nice that I have to do it twice. Listen to that. That is one of the best noises I've ever heard in a car. I mean, how do you not love that? How do you not love every part of that? This is definitely one of those pinch me moments. Like, how did this happen? How did I get in the position that I'm in, that a person like Brandon, would hand me the keys to his perfect, pristine 355 and let me wail on it. I don't know, but praise God. Yeah, and in case you're curious, I'm not the only one who really appreciates this car. Everywhere I go, and I'm in Newport Beach where there are nice cars all over the place, people are just pulling out their phones left and right, just ogling at it. The guys behind me right now in this, I think it's a Lexus CT200H, just both whipped out their phones and had to take a quick pic. I would do the same, and hopefully they're not just taking photos. Hopefully they got the video going to hear that brilliance. So okay, the car is fast, but it's not mind-bendingly so. So is there more to it? Perhaps the way it handles and brakes. I'm about to find out as I carry speed into this curve. Before I go deep into the brakes, great response from those. Pedal placement's ideal for rev match downshifting. Tons of grip from the Cup 2s. Balance with the mid-engine layout. More on the power. Oh my gosh! The noise in that tunnel! Oh! Have to do that again. Yes! Yes! Let me just attempt to break down why that was such an out-of-body experience. To drive a 30-year-old vehicle as hastily as I just did through those two sections is surreal. I drive modern, very powerful, very expensive cars like that often, but they have the latest and greatest engineering. This car, yes, it's modified, but it's built on a 30-year-old, actually older than that because it's based on the 348 platform, and it performs magnificently. The upgrades that Brandon made are appreciable. The braking was enormous. The Cup 2 tires provided immense grip. The suspension kept it flat, and the fluidity of the mid-engine layout was chef's kiss. It was just perfect. You could feel the car rotate gracefully. It never bucked the back end. It never shoved the nose and understeer. It just danced through that curve. And speaking of dancing, this is probably an overused metaphor, but let me address the gearbox here, because this gearbox does not want to be shoved into place. It is like a dancer. It wants to be directed. It wants to be ushered, suggested to move. And when you do that, when you treat it in that way, in that second to third or downshifting third to second as I did through those back two sections, then it performs beautifully, precisely as you hope it would, and the rest of the car stays settled and composed, and it just executes its maneuvers to applause. There is, in fact, only one thing I didn't completely adore about this drive, and that is the steering. Because yes, the diameter, the shape of the wheel, the look is perfect, but the feel of the steering through curves isn't all that talkative. It tells you some things about what you're doing, but it doesn't communicate in the way that the wheel looks like it should. It builds up some resistance as you take the curve, but there's just that sensitivity that I'm missing that is probably going to be here when Brandon does make the upgrade that he plans to add the 355 Challenge steering rack to this car. Then I could only imagine it's going to drive as perfectly as one of these cars ever could. Now as my blood pressure begins to descend, I'm just going to spare a moment of complete silence to listen to what it's like in this cabin at highway speeds. Okay, so we were just doing about 80 miles per hour, but because we were cruising below 3,500 RPM, the valves were closed the engine was quiet. You've got some wind noise, a little bit of tire noise, but nothing egregious. And as I've already praised, the seats are so comfortable, I can see why Brandon drives this vehicle several hundred miles every year to Monterey Car Week. Even the suspension system is sublime when just ambling about. It absorbs the road blemishes quite well. Yeah, you hop around, but you expect it to. You want it to. It's a Ferrari. You know, it's occurred to me. There's one thing I haven't done at all in this video, and that's go into reverse. And because I love this gated manual so much, I'm going to take the moment just to do that activity. Clutch in, press down, over to the left, pull it back, enjoy the sounds, and you're in reverse. And there is no backup camera, of course, so you just turn your head. Make sure you don't hit anyone. That was worth it for me. I'm not gonna forget today. I can't, it's not possible. This has been a meeting of a hero and living out an experience I've long desired to have. I've driven older Ferraris. I drove my friend's 328 GT-S. Never got to drive the Testarossa. That was always hoarded a little by the owner, which I understand. I mean, it was his baby. It was his pride and joy. But the fact that Brandon gave me the keys to his baby, to his pride and joy, I can only express my sincerest gratitude with the smile and the joy that I felt during this drive. And I want to leave you guys with one more short story. And that's from when I was a kid. I think it was 1998. They had just come out with Need for Speed for PC. And these were the dial-up internet days. I had to wait forever for that game to load just to play it, but I really wanted to play, so I waited. In the game, you had a choice of car. Two of those vehicles I debated often, and often chose one of the two. That was the Acura NSX. And that car is a big reason why the 355 had to be as good as it was, just to contend with the Acura. As I said, I often chose the NSX, and you know, now I kind of regret it. I wish I at least a few times chose the 355. It's kind of a joke because with that generation of video game, it's not like I could have actually told the differences between the two. But I feel like today is redemption, because actually driving this car makes me appreciate what this car was at that time and still is. So I want to thank Brandon one more time and encourage you guys to follow him on Instagram. You'll see lots of gorgeous photos of this car and his Lotus Elise, which I may also be able to drive in the future here. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, and share it, and I will see you again next time.